Great. Okay, thank you all today for attending this session. My name's Andrew. I will be your trainer for today. Today we're going to, for the next 30 minutes or so, we are going to just go through some basic understandings of food safety. Food safety, for someone like myself in my current role, is at the forefront of what we do each day here at the hospital. I produce over 3,000 meals for patients across Barwon Health, all the way at the main hospital and across all of our satellite sites. So food safety and the importance of food safety in relation to and compliance as well is very important. So I think it's something, and it's something that we can use every day in our daily work life and home life. First things first, I just want to make sure everyone's happy where they are. Everyone's in a safe environment. We're all set up at home ergonomically. We've got the computer, we've got access to a PC, we can see the screen in front. Today's intent is that I will run through a series of slides over the next 30 minutes. During those slides, I welcome any questions, and also during those slides, just to ensure that you're getting some understanding, there'll be some short quiz questions as well during that time. So the assessment, or just for me to test your competency and understanding of the topic, we'll just be asking some quiz questions, and there's no right or wrong answer. And at the same time, we'll also discuss the questions as well. Everyone happy with that? Everyone prepared? Everyone good to go?
Yep.
Yep. Let me go to the next one. So these are the topics that we will go through today. So we're just going to look at what is food safety, who is defined as a food handler, what are our responsibilities as food handlers, some common causes of food contamination, where does bacteria come from, food poisoning, types of food spoilage, some high and low risk foods, some food temperatures, and then at the end we'll just do an overlap, and we'll have a discussion, and we'll look at some future references as such. So firstly, what is food safety? From your perspective, gents, what do you think food safety is?
Just that awareness around where and how to handle your food, make sure that it's consumable.
It's in its simplest terms, it's just ensuring that the food we eat is safe to eat, and that's in its simplest term and understanding. So we could all be defined as food handlers of sorts, whether we do it in a commercial kitchen or when we're doing it at home, preparing our breakfast, lunch, or dinner as such. So who is a food handler? Well, that's anyone that's involved in any activity that involves food. So that's the delivery and processing of it, the storage, the processing and preparation, the serving of food, the types of packaging that food comes in, how it's transported to and from, whether it's to and from a supermarket or to and from a shop, and also the displaying of food. Exactly. So that's an example of displaying, packaging, serving, and preparation, of course.
Shortly consuming, yeah,
and consuming as such. So they're just some key points in relation to who is a food handler as such. So one of our first questions that I want to ask you guys is, who is responsible for making food safe? In relation to whether it's yourself, someone in a restaurant, a cook, food safety supervisor, who do you think is responsible for making food safe, whether it's you're consuming it yourself or whether you're consuming, you're providing it to others to consume?
Yeah. Sorry, Gennady, you go. I tend to talk too much.
Sorry, yeah. Everybody.
And that's spot on, mate. Everyone, anyone who has involvement in food, whether it's you're preparing your own food for your own consumption, or if you're preparing for your family or friends, or for someone in a restaurant, you are responsible for that food safety and ensuring that that food is safe for consumption as such. Any questions so far, gents, in relation to what we've covered?
No.
Okay. So the next topic we're going to just quickly cover is what are food handlers' responsibilities? So as food handlers, it's our responsibility to employ proper food handling practices to minimize the risks of bacterial contamination in the food that we prepare and serve. So can include, maintaining good personal hygiene, using gloves properly. So where do you think we might use gloves or have to use gloves when we're a food handler as such?
From handling raw food or different types of food?
Yeah, raw food or the environment. Think of the environment that you're working in. You probably, when you're at home and you're preparing your food for your family, you're not going to be wearing gloves as such. But when you're actually when you're in a commercial environment, you often see, and it's a requirement under the Food Act for them to wear gloves as such. They also includes, safely defrosting, cooking, cooling, and reheating food, and monitoring the food temperature. So when we go back to, defrosting food items as such, I remember my mum, she'd just, and I'm guilty of it even to this day as such, she'd take out the roast on the Saturday night and just leave it on the bench overnight to defrost. Not really the best way of doing it, because it can open you up to the risk of bacterial contamination as such. When we're going to reheat food as well, we make sure that it reaches that appropriate food temperature, core temperature, to kill off any bacterial infection. So as food handlers, using gloves, is this the only thing you need to do to prevent food poisoning? True or false? What do you think, guys, and why?
False. And
Define. Yeah, go ahead. Thank you.
yeah, do you want to expand on it? Or the false, and because there's so much more than just gloves, as you said. There's
Correct, because
temperature control. Yeah.
There's other factors. If you go back to the previous slide, gloves is one mechanism of which we can prevent food contamination, but there's other things that we need to address and ensure that we follow when we're preparing food. And that's that personal hygiene, safely defrosting, cooking the food to correct temperature, cooling it down. We don't, when we cook certain foods and we're finished foods, we want to use it for the next day. We're not going to just whack it in the fridge. Well, hopefully we don't whack it in the fridge when it's still at optimal temperature. We allow it to cool down to a safe level. And then when we're reheating the food, we're bringing it up to that core temperature range as such. So you're spot on, gents. Any questions so far?
So food poisoning is the same as food contamination. This means the same.
So that's a good point. Food poisoning, no. Food poisoning, food contamination and food spoilage are two different things and can occur in two different ways. So we'll go through and hopefully you'll get an understanding. So the causes of food contamination. So there are three main ways of which, food contamination can occur. So that's biological hazards. So that's microorganisms, bacteria, fungi, yeast, mold, and viruses. So just off the top of your head, where have you seen that happen? Or where do you think that's the most common thing? I often see it at my place when my daughters leave something out for a period of time unopened on the bench, you might say. Bread, bread goes stale. 2 or 3 days, it becomes unusable, and you can see the mold growing on it as such. Items like raw chicken is very susceptible to microorganisms occurring and being visible as such. The other thing is chemical hazards, including cleaning chemicals or foods that in naturally occurring toxins such as green potatoes. Cross-contamination with cleaning, the benches of cleaning. That's why it's very important to wipe, wipe down the surfaces once you've used a chemical with a neutral agent as well, because you don't want that cross-contamination to occur. And there's also physical hazards, that's including, dangerous physical objects such as, plastic or glass, elastic bands, etc. Can, becoming contaminating in the food. So what's just to test your knowledge as such. So has anyone worked in a kitchen before as such and had a cut? So what was the process there? What did you do to prevent food contamination from a physical hazard perspective?
We needed to arrest the cut.
Yeah.
And use a food grade Band-Aid, blue one.
Blue one. That's what I was looking for, my friend, because it's clearly identifiable that if it unfortunately does then drop into the food, it's easily identifiable within the food as such, not in a normal Band-Aid. That's correct. And that's standard process in all commercial kitchens, the use of blue Band-Aids as such. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for that. Okay, so I'm going to ask you another question. Oh no, we've got another slide. Sorry, my fault. So where does bacteria come from as such? So most often bacteria, are able to multiply or form a toxin within the food. Bacteria and microorganisms can often be found in the soil, on animals, on people, and on things, what we touch and use. So that's why we can important that we wash our hands and food hygiene as such. The factors that affect the growth of bacteria. So we're looking at the temperature of the food, the moisture content within the food, the time they must grow. We're talking about the microorganisms, particularly in food kept in danger. So that's at temperature, Joe, between 5 and 6 degrees, and its exposure to air. So these are all factors that we just need to be aware of ourselves when we come to the preparation of food as such. So just a quick little question is, finding a piece of plastic in food, what type of contamination would we think this is? Physical, and that's correct. So that's correct. It's a type of physical contamination as such. Just separate to this, what do you think would be a can we both Gennady, can you give me an example of what you would define as chemical contamination within food?
Let's say, for example, it's a meat plant, yeah, and they're slicing up the meat. They've got all these machines working, right? And they're using chemicals to obviously clean them, yeah, every day or every year. If they're then not washed off, that they're cleaned off those chemicals, that they actually leach into the food the next time the meat.
Great, exactly. Great example. It's a great example. And Mike, what do you think? Can you give me an example of a microbiological food contaminant?
Yeah, that's when you left let's say there's a piece of steak left out on the bench, and you've allowed it to sit in an environment that's otherwise acceptable above temperature, or it's been out for an extended period of time, and it allows a bacteria to grow or become more extensive. Is that right?
Yeah, no, that's perfect. That's spot on, gents. Both of those are great examples of types of food contamination as such.
I've got a little quick story about losing a job because I introduced a physical contaminant. You guys want to hear it? Or is it going to blow your time out?
No time. If it's quick one, yes. If it's quick one, yeah.
I used to work at a bakery and I was in charge of making cinnamon donuts. And we used to have a hopper that you'd make sure that the donuts would drop into the hot oil and it would disperse a certain amount. And I used to have a plastic spoon that I would scrape the hopper with.
You didn't
And
lick it, did you?
No, well, I got distracted one day and I've left the plastic spoon over the hot oil. And then I've gone off to do something else.
Okay.
And then my plastic spoon, I came back and it was gone. I was like, oh, where's it gone? I don't know. And what had happened was that it had dropped, the heat from the oil had allowed the plastic spoon to soften and it actually fell into the oil and dissipated into, and then I continued to make these cinnamon donuts. And then later in the day, we were getting all these return people going, there's little yellow bits and pieces of plastic inside my cinnamon donuts, and it was my spatula that miraculously disappeared. So needless to say, I never really kicked on in the food industry too well. Matter of fact, that was the last day I had there at the bakery. So
Fair enough.
Anyway,
fair enough.
Go for it.
But that's a good point. That's a good segue as such. It just shows you how easy, whether it's a physical, chemical, or microbiological, how easy it is to contaminate food as such, and how easy, if we don't concentrate on what we're doing when it comes to the preparation of food, the risk that can eventuate. Quick question, another one just before we move on as well is, how can we reduce cross-contamination from raw meat to cooked meat? Thinking about how we store food, especially, whether this is very much applicable at home.
Yeah. So yeah, separate containers.
So
shelves.
Yeah. So all of the options there. So we wash and sanitize the chopping board between use for raw meat and cooked meat. We store the raw meat below the cooked meat in the fridge. We wash all your hands after handling raw meat. All of the above.
Yeah, all of the above.
Gurundi, what do you think?
Yeah, that's pretty right. Yeah.
All of the above, gents. Or this is the way to go, especially with meat and raw chicken. You don't want to get salmonella poisoning, or gastro as such. It's the worst. I don't know if you've ever had it before, but it's not something that you really want to get, especially if it's related to something that can be prevented. So food poisoning. Anyone who eats contaminated food is going to get food poisoning. It can be quite serious, can cause severe illness and sometimes even death. Has anyone had the pleasure of being poisoned in some way? No, I'm not talking about after a heavy Saturday night. I'm talking about, whether it's food you prepared yourself or food that you've actually consumed outside, at a restaurant or a takeaway. Has anyone had the displeasure of having food poisoning before?
Very much so. Yeah.
Good, Andy? Yeah. So some of the symptoms, can be mild, and diarrhea, stomach cramps, nausea, vomiting, fever, and headaches. Symptoms can appear within an hour or two, or may take up to 36 hours to appear. So food poisoning, depending on the food that's being consumed, can pretty much occur within an hour of consumption as such. And an example might be, I don't know if you guys are sushi eaters.
Love it.
Love it, and that's a high incidence of food poisoning. Poor preparation of the fish, incorrect storage, the fish being off out of date as such. Chicken as well, chicken not being cooked correctly. You can have the symptoms and be experiencing food poisoning within an hour or two, or certain foods may take time to through the digestion process for them to eventuate as such. So food temperature. So it's when we're preparing food, it's important and vital that we cook food to the appropriate temperature. We hold it and we store it and freeze it at the correct temperatures as well, because these are all factors that will prevent bacterial growth occurring within the food that we're consuming. So when we're cooking food, we need to always cook it above that 60 degrees. When we're keeping food within the fridge, we always need to keep it below 5 degrees. And when we're keeping frozen food, we need to get it below that 15 degrees C. And all these will all prevent bacteria growing within food. So, and that's that. And what I'm saying is, if you look at the hot 60, the cold 5, and the frozen 15, that ideal temperature for bacterial to multiply is if we store between that 5 and 60 degrees, which we refer to as the temperature danger zone. So if we're, keeping food out for an extended period of time, or we're not cooking that food to that 60 degrees as such, well, then we're going to be opening ourselves up to possible food poisoning occurring as such. So high risk foods. First question, just separate to this one. Each of you, what would you define as a high risk food example?
Raw meat.
Raw meat, yeah. Good on you there.
Yep. Yep.
Yep. What would you give? Can you give us an example of a high risk food?
Seafood.
Seafood. Okay. So one's a cold food, the seafood as such, because we usually, we could eat it raw, but we also cook with the high food, the meat. So out of those there, the correct storage to store high risk food below, what do you reckon? Below 5, between 5 and 60, above 60 degrees, or cold food below 5 degrees C and hot food above 60 degrees C?
So
Between B, between 5 and 60. Yeah.
no,
Which one?
just
Pardon?
to store it?
To store it, yeah.
I'd go A.
To store it, yes. For cold food, yes. If it's cold.
Yeah.
The correct one is D. So you're half right, Mike. So cold food below that 5 degrees. But if we're storing hot food, so say when we're storing hot food in a bain-marie, as such, it needs to be kept. So when I'm preparing down the tray line, the meals, we have to store all the food above 60 degrees as such. Can I just also ask you another question? What did we refer to as B? Can you remember the previous slide? What we referred to as this range?
It's like the danger zone.
The danger zone. That's right, my friend. That's that temperature danger zone. So we want to keep the food out of that range, because that's the range that bacteria will multiply as such. Any questions so far, gents, or what we covered moving forward before we move forward? We've only got
No, you're going well.
No. I'm just mindful of time. I don't know. I haven't got a timer on my thing. I think it was around quarter past I started.
16 past it was.
16 past. Okay,
Yeah.
so we're still on track. We are. Okay. So food spoilage, and I think that you brought this up before. There is a difference between food that is spoiled and food that can cause food poisoning. So it's often obvious, sour milk, moldy bread, or soft, slimy fruit. Sorry, that's the typo. And vegetables. And how can we prevent this? So rotating, we heard of the first in, first out method as such. When we're storing food within the fridge, we're checking our use by dates on our items within our fridges and in our pantries as such, and we're storing that food correctly in the refrigerator and the freezer. And just remember that example I gave in relation to the correct storage of raw meat as such.
Mm-hmm.
So which of the following groups do you think has the lowest risk for food poisoning, and why? The adults, the elderly, the infants, or people with cancer as such, or illness as such? So Out of those, do you think would be less susceptible to having food poisoning as such?
A.
What do you think?
Yeah, A as well.
Hey, and that's right, gents, because the others, of age, immune systems, are more susceptible, where you would think most adults are, are quite healthy and strong as such. High risk foods. So we've got certain types of foods that will allow quick growth of bacteria, high nutrients. Certain examples are, which we've identified and spoken about before, that's our dairy products, our meat, our poultry, our seafood, cooked rice, prepared salads, good old favorite that everyone likes, the sushi, and anything that's containing eggs as such. Any can think off the top of the head high risk foods?
No, fairly comprehensive for me. I'm sure there's others, but that's all that comes to mind at the moment.
And on the flip side, we've got low risk foods, foods in which bacteria don't grow quickly. Cereals, flours, confectionery, sugars, dry biscuits, spices, and uncooked grains. And this is often because they're processed foods. They're either dried, salted, or acidified, which lower or eliminates the ability for microorganisms to multiply within the food as such. Is it important to always wash your hands when handling eggs in relation to high and low risk foods? Just think, probably the hint would be, think of the source of the eggs.
Right. Yeah, it's important.
Yeah, because, you think of, you buy your eggs. I don't know where you buy your eggs, but you might often buy them from, direct from the farm, or even, the commercial eggs. They don't go through a wash process as such before they reach you at home as such. So just think of where they've laid, you might say, because that simple cracking the egg in the preparation of food, and whether you bring it to your mouth or you're actually mixing in, at home, you're probably just using your hands as such, and not, all these factors need to be considered as such. So it is a high risk food, and important to wash your hands when preparing food in relation to the handling of eggs as such. So what I hope I have achieved, and gents, this is your opportunity, and I welcome some questions from you in relation to what we've covered, is that you've been able to just, over the last half an hour, either I've just given you some new insights, B, I've just refreshed you on what you probably already know and do within your day-to-day lives as such, in relation to the preparation of food as such, and the importance of food safety, food handling, and proper food hygiene as such, and the issues that may arise if we don't follow those processes as such. I just want to send you to, if you wanted to do some food information, or some good resources out there as such, is, you can go to the local government website as such. If you want to do a free course, which I send all my team on as such, as a quick 30-minute course in relation to proper food safety and food hygiene, there's a link there. It's www.dofoodsafety.health.vic.au. That's a great resource for anyone that wants a free qualification, but also an understanding of food handling and food safety. And also there's the Food Act it's applicable within our state as such. Gents, can I ask, is there any questions in relation to what I've just gone through today? Did you want any clarification, or did you want me to go over something as such? How do you think you felt with that? Do you think you've got something out of it as such? Something that you didn't know, learn?
Yes, I have. That's indirectly aligns with my industry, and it's been a discussion point in recent times, that will most probably be implementing food safety or a particular food safety process into my industry in the not too distant future.
What's that?
HACCP principles, because we're responsible for water mains and water renewal, and the transference of bacteria through potable water. So
Okay. Yeah.
yeah, valuable, mate. I liked it. Cheers, it was good.
Anything from you, Gudundi, before I finish off today?
No.
Okay.
Is that Do Food Safety website? Is that the right spelling? DOO?
Do DOO food safety. That's
Yeah, okay.
health.vic.au. Yeah.
I'm interested
And
in
that's
that
a great
takeaway, mate.
that's a great resource, and that's, as I say, I send all my team onto that. That's part of their induction, you might say, for anyone that has exposure to food within the hospital here as such.
Brilliant. Thank you.
All right, gents, I appreciate your time, and thank you for that.
All right. No worries.
Hopefully this is recorded.
I would say so.